Before we begin, the name is placed on the top right side of the screen. When she began to undergo experiments in her fast life, rumors were circulating outside. Rumors that the Green Ruler was searching for his lost daughter. This man, who was always accompanied by the epithet arrogant and rude, was also a liar. In fact, what he was searching for wasn't his lost daughter, but a substitute. How does she know? A man who loves beauty and greenery. The head of the greenhouse, the Duke of Aubrey. This man who met an unfortunate end. The substitute this man found was none other than Nari. Now he asked him, so he was saying that his daughter was lost before she was even a year old. She thought to herself. She did not know how he knew what his daughter's voice sounded like, even when she was a child, or how he knew that she was a genius even when she was a baby. The Green Ruler claimed his daughter took after her. He further told her so if she was going to act like his daughter, she needed to at least do that much. She wondered what he meant by act. He declared he would be asking her a few questions and she needed to write down the answers. Nari thought to herself. He treated her like she was some kind of orphan who had no right to refuse. When she saw the paper, it was just a blank sheet of paper. The Green Ruler told Mary that if she ended up passing the test, she would be able to live as his daughter for the next 5 years without any worries. 5 years, she repeated. He frowned at her, saying she thought she could live her whole life as his great and amazing daughter. She wanted to tell him she thought he was just narcissistic based on her memories of her previous life. But what she told him was she just thought it was a form of sponsorship. He replied it is because she had something to do for a while. After 5 years, he would sponsor her to study abroad so she would live in another country. She realized, so in essence, she just had to do the job of a substitute. He asked her what her hobbies were. She replied reading. He commented she seemed to be quite cultured for someone who did not look like it. He then asked her how old she was. She guessed about 10 years old. He revealed his daughter was 11 years old. She wondered why did he ask if that was the case then. She really felt like she was being interviewed, even though she had never been to a real one. He then suggested that this time she should try writing the answers to the question on the paper he gave her in advance. She wondered if he was going to give her some math problems to solve. But to her surprise, there was a heart riddle that she needed to solve. She wanted to tell this man to have some conscience. Her job felt like dropping. He told her it was easy, so she should hurry up and solve it. What she was staring at, but she couldn't even understand what that meant. She wondered what Mensa was. It was a word she had never heard before. However, she believed she knew the answer to this problem. As she was solving it down on the blank paper, she thought to herself, how did she end up in this situation? To explain how she ended up in this situation, she would have to look back on her life, which had been so harsh and unfair that she couldn't bear to open her eyes. To put it simply, she was originally an experiment subject of some crazy scientist. Her memories from childhood gradually disappeared as a side effect of the experiment. She believed him to be her father for her entire life and endured the harsh experiments until she was 24 years old. But she was just a vessel to contain the soul of the crazy psycho's dead wife. In agony from betrayal, she closed her eyes on the cold experiment table. She thought she was dead, but when she opened her eyes again, she was somewhere else. At first, she thought she was in heaven, but she had gone back in time, to the moment she had just stepped into the orphanage where that man had sold her. Fortunately, the crazy scientist was a regular newspaper reader, and she secretly read it so she knew roughly 10 years of the future. And she saw this man's name a lot in the newspaper back then. Duke Shakol Aubrey is the second most powerful authority in the empire next to the royal family. The man who controls 50% of the empire's trade. Born as the youngest of 3 brothers in the ducal family, he became the head of the family after surpassing his brothers. She thinks perhaps it was natural for him to become a ruthless and sensitive person in order to survive in the ducal family where cunning is rampant. She snaps out of her thoughts when he asks her why she is just staring at him without solving it. She replies, "Oh yes, she solved it all." He seems surprised that she has already solved it and questions her. She did not cheat, did she? Nari reveals other facts about him. He is very weak to his wife and follows the ruler of the Blue Moon well. It is something that not many people know. However, she is suddenly taken aback, wondering how she could possibly know that. Ever since she came back in time, it's been strange. She feels like she's familiar with sights she has never seen before, or information about people just naturally comes to her mind. He stands up abruptly, stating all right, though he doesn't know how she solved it in such a short time. She remarks, well, she is also a bit of a genius. Is that so? That is good, he answers. He also announces she barely passed, reminding her that he's smart too. However, he's already made the decision that he's going to adopt this girl. She's objectively cute. She thinks actually she was supposed to get the wrong answer. She has regressed to the past, but all she has is this shrink body. She wonders how something like a Duchess daughter role audition did not happen in the previous life. She reveals she died and came back to life 3 months ago. The experiment performed by the psycho kept hurting a lot. They were painful like death, so rather she just wanted to give up and die. Later she found herself in a forest. In front of her was a mother telling Lana that being adopted by a noble was an honorable thing. However, Lana expressed that she did not want her to leave her. Nari wanted to know where she was. What was this? She remembered people said that after death people couldn't feel anything, but for her it hurt so much like she was hit. She was sure she was dead, but still she looked around and wondered where was this. Her vision was low, and there was this strange pain she had been feeling since earlier. Lana felt like a familiar name to her, but she had never heard of it before. Her mom just told her she will surely be a great lady. Nari realized it was the kind tone of voice used only for children who were adopted by nobles. However, she knew this orphanage was like hell. As an adult, her skin even melted on her face. As an after effect of the experiment, she felt strong pain even when the wind passed by. The smell of the terrible drug was more fragrant than the smell of her rotting body. She looked at her tiny hands and realized she regressed. She also remembered it definitely hurt a little while ago, but strangely, it doesn't at all anymore. She sees her long flowing hair without any damaged areas, pure white skin, a little skinny but round and cute fingers. She realizes it is not a dream and she is finally free. The freedom she longed for. She thinks maybe God took pity on her, and in a sudden burst of joy, she leaps into the air, her hands raised high. She believes it is a chance to start over. Suddenly, something is written on her left wrist, catching her eye. She wonders what it is and questions herself. Why? Why now? Are these lingering traces of the experiment? She can't help but ponder. She tries to convince herself it is okay to start over again. It's okay even if she doesn't have any power. The biggest reason she faced death in her last life is when an indescribable ancient language takes over her entire body. It also means the trace of a terminal illness will eventually lead to death. Tears well in her eyes as she curses that psycho. She thought she was going to live a normal life this time. She whispers she is doomed, however. She thinks if she's back in the past, that psycho is also alive. But he still doesn't know her, right? At that moment, she decides she's going to get revenge. Now that things are like this, she's determined not to die alone. She will destroy that person's laboratory and life. She is aware first she needs to win the favor here and get a letter of recommendation. It is the most famous nursery in the empire. There's a secret here. Children who get good grades in class can live under the patronage of nobles. While most kids who were not are children with bad grades, also children who are not liked by their teachers. These children disappeared at some point saying they were adopted. She is determined to get good grades and receive a reasonable amount of support and decides, no more the stupid and obedient her, and then she will definitely get her revenge. Within a little time she's done with her cooking and tells her teacher, who is gaping at her, that all the dishes are done. She asks if there is anything else she can help with. She asks in disbelief already, but then tells her all right, she may go back now. She expresses her thank you and promises she will make sure to become a good student who repays her teachers. The teacher is shocked and wonders, isn't this kid learning how to work in the kitchen for the first time? She can't help but think, how come this child can cover the task here and there? A kid who always scored low, can someone change within a few months? Nori wonders if she's among the teachers who give grades. After considering the possibility, she goes out of her way to be extra respectful to her. She thinks if she takes a high-intensity class, it should not be difficult for her to score points since she was already used to it because she cooked and cleaned with her sick body in order to be loved by the mad scientist. Thinking about it makes her angry. She tells herself she will definitely get her revenge. That is when she bumps into someone. She is quick to apologize, but the man is rude and calls her a dirty trash. She looks at him. Her face is contorted in anger. The man asks her if she someday ends up killing someone. Is that what she is going to say? Sorry? He then states, does she think a low-class person like her can talk to him? She replies yes. She thinks she can though. He claims she doesn't even know who he is, but she lets him know she does. He's the one who is receiving support from the Countess Charlotte. Sponsorship system. This is a system in this orphanage where the honor of the sponsoring noble increases as the sponsor pays well and performs well. The arrogant man asks if she cannot even remember his name, probably offended that a little child cannot remember his name. He adds anyway, he's not a fool like her who wasn't chosen. She warns him to be careful as that count kills people and doesn't even feel sorry. She advises him to quickly leave as who knows it might be him next time. This enrages the man to the point of snapping, demanding to know what she's talking about. Does she want to die? Is she asking to get beaten up right now? She smiles at him, telling it to try it for once. He raises his fist to strike her, but is stopped by someone telling him what he's doing now. It is the teacher who states she cannot believe he would act so violently. Behind her is a man in a cloak. She thinks that is a lie. Afterwards, they look over violence as nothing, since these children are sponsored. Peter tries to explain that it's not it. She thinks maybe it's because she's a child who will soon be sponsored. That is when her gaze falls on a cloak guy. She realizes they probably want to look good to the person wearing that robe behind them. Maybe that person is a high-ranking person. Nori saw her teacher walking with care and knows she won't let Peter make a mistake in front of an important person. When the teacher asks her, she assures the teacher that she's really fine, even when plastering a smile on her face to make it look real. She thinks when she receives support from a noble man, soon she will flatten his nose herself. She's taken by surprise when the man says he guesses she should come with him for a while. The teacher tells him the nominator child she was talking about. She thinks she did say it would be soon, but not soon like this at the scene of the incident. Her mouth drops open when she realizes she was caught in a fight and the first impression went down. Nori greets him respectfully and introduces herself as Anisha. She thinks, well, he already saw her as a victim anyway, so she should keep a smiling face. However, his reaction looks cold. He ignores her and asks the teacher if she taught them noble manners. The teacher assures him they train them because they are often sponsored by nobles and hired as maids or servants. However, out of the blue, he asks Nori how she knew that he was a noble man. Nori thinks because of his overbearing tone and because the quality of his robe looks good, but she's aware she cannot say that. She responds the way he walks and talks looks so graceful. Is that so? He says. Can she feel the elegance even when he's wearing a robe? She thinks she only said this because she was wondering if he was a sponsor, but he really is very self-absorbed. When she looks at the purple eyes that peek out, she thinks of them as mysterious yet pretty. Now that she thinks about it, she recalls, didn't the teacher say he nominated her? The teacher tells her it's not polite to make guests wait, so she should follow. She decides for now she will just follow them. Once he settles down, the teacher requests him to please sit here and the tea will be served shortly. She then declares first of all she should introduce the child again. Nori thinks this is her first time she has seen teacher Irina with such a low altitude. However, he dismisses her, telling her the introduction is done, so she should leave now. The teacher is confused and claims regarding the counseling's adoption, but he cuts her off asking when did he say he was adopting. He tells her he is the one making the decisions and judgments, so she should go out now. Nari realizes this is the first time someone behaves like this to the proud teacher Arena. Teacher Arena is the most discriminatory of all the teachers. She was a person who was proud of the work done at this orphanage. She is also the most pushy teacher to her and other ordinary kids. Nari cannot believe a teacher like this would humble herself. She is jolted out of her thoughts when someone calls her name. Suddenly, she finds herself embraced by the teacher, who whispers in her ear with a menacing tone, warning her to never, ever behave rudely toward guests. The teacher looks like Lucifer from hell. Nari is aware she's taking out her anger on her because she is the easy one. Her expressions remain unaffected as she assures her teacher she will. The teacher tells the Duke if he ever needs anything, just to call for her and leaves after that. Nari clenches her fist as she tries to calm herself, telling herself it is fine, she should be a good kid who can solve everything, and to see if she can smile like that when she gets stabbed in the back by her. However, her eyes are impossibly wide, reflecting a crazed expression on her face. She feels frustrated and irritated. She reminds herself she should pretend to be cute. The Duke makes himself comfortable. She thinks he is disgusting. He tells her to sit down as well. Now that he has taken off his cloak, her eyes widen in surprise when she looks at his long green hair and purple eyes, a rare combination and beautiful appearance. She thinks it's amazing, but there is something about his face. Amusement is evident in his eyes as he exclaims she thinks he is disgusting. Suddenly, she feels shocked. She thinks this is, without blood, tears, or misfortune, a rare genius, sharp tongue, and with the worst personality. It is her first meeting with the damn Duke Shekol Aubrey. Later, he tells her they should get going. As she's sitting in the carriage looking outside, she wonders if she seriously gets going like this. What about adoption documents? A month of training before adoption. He asks her if she is disappointed. She replies no, she is not. She thinks he did not even give her time to think about it. As an opponent to another opponent, she needs to think about it first. She believes obviously this man will die. If not, the family may become extinct, but it's not like they're playing a time bomb game of who explores first. She then tries to recall why the man had died. After a moment of contemplation, the memory finally comes back to her. After his sick wife died, due to his sense of loss, he attended a hunting competition hosted by the imperial family. The magic power went out of control and almost killed the royal family. In the end, this man was the most followed and light ruler of justice. The head of the Argo family, Alf, was killed by Duke Argo. After that, the power of Rust was considered evil and was sealed away. The whole family was wiped out. But then the story picks up again when a female protagonist with the power of Rust appears. Again, she is surprised how she is aware of all of this. She wonders if it is the side effect of the experiments. After the experiment, a lot of strange things happen. She muses. Perhaps she developed some kind of recognitive power. Her gaze fills with sadness as she thinks that is funny. She died, came back to life, and returned to the past. But the after effects are still there. She checks her hands, thinking because it is time limited. The Duke, who is observing her, asks if she is called Anisha. She replies yes. Before they arrive, he wants to tell her a few rules and precautions. He tells her first she should call her by her new name. He tells her to remember from now on she is not Anisha anymore. She is now Annette Aubrey. As she steps out of the carriage, he informs her this is the place where she will live from now on. She gazes at the mansion in front of her, awestruck and amazed by its sheer beauty and grandeur. She thinks it's very grand, unlike her situation. Her gaze then falls on a woman who is looking at her, her gaze flickering with concern. She wonders who that person is. Her eyes fill with tears as she rushes towards hers. She realizes she must be Rosanna, who will become her mother. the first victim of the tragedy of Duke Aubrey. She glances at the Duke, who's looking at her very intensely. He looks anxious. She knows he fears she might make a mistake. She wants to ask him if he thinks she wouldn't remember what he said in the carriage earlier. His words repeat in her mind that she should discard her name. Her name is now Annette Aubrey. She also remembers he told her the moment they arrive at the mansion, she should address him as father, and soon she will meet his wife, and she shall call her mother. He also demanded that she should vow to faithfully fulfill the role of his daughter while portraying that character. She told him it would have been easier to just find his daughter. He revealed, of course, he found her, however, she was already dead, and he couldn't bring himself to tell his wife the truth. He seemed lost for a moment, but then quickly composed himself, telling her no more questions on that matter. He also told her there is an oracle. If she needed help when he was not around, she could ask her, as she knew the truth. He warned her once again not to forget from this moment on. She was the sole princess of the duchy for the next 5 years. She thought to herself the threat of being sent back to the orphanage, if exposed, was just an added bonus. He asked her if she was only capable of saying yes, telling her their child was bright, innocent, and kind, since he was also like that, so it was only natural that his daughter would be too. Now there was the problem. She wondered, how did a child who had lived as an orphan for a lifetime react when he suddenly had parents? As the mother called for her, she ended up hiding behind the Duke, causing him to be surprised as well. Her eyes well up with tears as she whispers, "Mother." The Duke looks at her intently, probably to find out what she's playing at. She thinks, why didn't she pay attention to such details earlier? A daughter finding her parents would not just be happy, she might be afraid of rejection. The grand surroundings would be intimidating and unfamiliar, causing fear. She would likely seek more comfort in the adults she has seen more. Her eyes flicker with sadness as she thinks she did not particularly want to know all this in such detail. Rosanna encourages her, telling her it is Mom, and apologizes because it took her this long to find her. She admits Mom made a mistake and wants to just hug her once. Tears fall out of her eyes as she rushes towards her mom. She thinks the embrace is warm, but why does her heart feel so turbulent? Is it because she's not meant to receive the warmth of the Duchess, or is it because she imagines those hellish days just to shed tears? The Duke tells Rosanna the child must be bewildered. He softly tells her to look at him and reminds her he has to show her to her room, so she should go inside as she is still unwell. Annette thinks she did not know he was capable of speaking in such a soft voice. Rosanna looks at her with soft eyes and tells her to go and rest a bit since she would join her for dinner tonight. After Rosanna leaves with a maid, the Duke leans closer in front of her and exclaims she's really crying. She tells him this is acting. Acting? He repeats, confused. She teases him, saying yes, his daughter is bright, innocent, and kind, right? So isn't this what she should be doing? He genuinely looks confused and comments how absurd. He then lets all the maids know the princess has returned and they should take care of her so that not a single hair is harmed. They are all quick to obey. She looks at them in awe. The Duke asks her why she is surprised. He offers her his hand and says it is her future home after all. She agrees and takes his hand. She thinks even though it is unavoidable to have expectations, all these fantastic events are just for 5 years. The two identical-looking maids greet her. One introduces herself as Mary, the other introduces herself as Gold. Distracted, she responds with a vague, yes, yes, as her mind wanders elsewhere. She is anxious about already being separated from the Duke, but convinces herself she just has to do what she's told, and there shouldn't be any problem. The maids encourage her to talk informally to them. She thinks it is a smooth start, but what would it mean? Panicking, she claims she can do it herself, so they can go now. They look at her with concerned gazes, but she thinks it is embarrassing for her to have them help her with her bath too. They insist, but she interjects. No, really, while looking so panicked. She wonders, how should she get out of this if she takes off her clothes now? She will be caught with the crest. When the maid tries to insist again, she forces the tears to well up in her eyes. Looking so lost, she says she's embarrassed in a small, vulnerable voice. Both the maids get trapped in her act. They ask her would it be okay for them to just draw the water for her, and they will wait in the room. She sheds a tear or two, admitting softly. But she wants to get dressed on her own too. She thinks to herself she cannot tell the Duke this secret. If he finds out, she will be immediately excommunicated. She believes there is no point in holding on to this shabby defect that she might die with at any moment. She can hide it for now, but she is aware she needs to find another solution. This excuse won't work, especially after she gets used to this mansion. As she enjoys her bath, she suddenly recalls, now that she thinks about it, she does have that thing, doesn't she? Chameleon slime. An item invented by a certain confectionery scientist. If it is attached to someone's skin, it will change color to match the surrounding skin tone, just like a chameleon. She reveals many people bought it to cover a burn mark or scars. If she uses that, she can easily hide these kinds of traces. The problem, however, is it's not going to be released for a few more years, and she cannot wait for years. She thinks she needs to get it in at least half a year. She's aware she has to find that eccentric scientist and make it faster than the deadline he has set. Fortunately for her, she knows that scientists very well. The eccentric scientist who the crazy scientist who used her hated because he was the genius of the century. Thanks to the crazy scientist's ego, she got to know what he likes and dislikes. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes no longer hold any warmth as she conspires against him and believes if she throws some bait, he is sure to bite. When she steps out in the room, Mary smiles brightly at her and asks if she's already done washing up. She demands she wants to look around the mansion. Mary asks if she's tired. Doesn't she have to rest in her room? Does she? She assures Mary it's fine. She thinks to herself she needs to get used to the mansion quickly. After a while, as she reaches the dining table, she closes her eyes and sighs deeply because she barely managed to look around the mansion, and it is already dinner time. When she reaches the table, Gold informs her dinner will be ready soon. Annette thinks this mansion is so big that she almost got a 2-day tour. As she is eating, her mother calls out, drawing her attention. She looks at her mother and smiles. Her mother asks her how the food is. She exclaims it is delicious. She thinks about how before the regression she only had Ives, and at the orphanage the food was at the level of group meals. Rosanna offers her more desserts and passes them over to her, telling her to try these too. They are very sweet. Annette expresses her gratitude to her mother. She looks happy and peaceful. She thinks she cannot eat it all, but it is really delicious. She thinks how happy she would be if she could eat like this for the rest of her life. She raises her eyes to look at her mother when her mother admits, by the way, she knows this is a shameless request, but would she be able to call her mom? She confesses she has heard that she's very mature for her age, and she knows she cannot make up for the time they could not be together. But she would really appreciate it if she could call her something a little more comfortable, like mom. She is quick to fulfill Rosanna's request and calls her mom. Her mom looks up, meeting her daughter's gaze. So much emotion passes in her eyes. Annette lets her mom know she will try to call her mom from now on. She also thanks her for not giving up on her and finding her. The Duke once again appears surprised, as though he hadn't anticipated this reaction from her. She notices his expression and thinks to herself that he certainly looked surprised. She looks away and ponders. She was just doing what she had to do. She looks up, sensing something amiss. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts. The Duke, who has been watching his wife closely, sees her suddenly collapse and cries out, "Rosanna!" The Duke pleads with his wife to come to her senses and orders the maids to take her to room. Annette watches everything in silence and realizes the situation is more serious than she thought. She thinks it is amazing how she did not collapse right away. She also notices the expressions of the Duke and realizes he looks desperate and she needs to help him. She asks Mary without looking back if she's here. Mary says yes, she is. She doesn't know how to cure that disease, but She instructs Mary to prepare hot water, sugar, and dry plant powder. She knows a way to calm the situation. She also tells her to roast the rye plants in a pan, dry it a little, then grind it into powder and bring it to her. Rye plants are one of those types of weeds that are everywhere, but it also is the important ingredient used in treating diseases. When making a treatment, a dispensing process is requested. There will be an immediate calming effect. Mary responds all right, she will prepare it right now. She grins, deciding then now she should play an innocent and bright genius. As the Duke has helped her sit down on the bed, he asks his wife if she's calming down. She says yes, but is worried how surprised Annette would be. She confesses she thinks she cannot be a good mother. The Duke genuinely looks broken when she says things like that. He requests her not to say things like that about herself. They both look up when Annette calls out to her mother, standing nearby. Holding a cup in her hand, she tells her mother that she has brought her some medicine. The Duke thinks medicine. What is she talking about? He tells her that her mother is sick, but she ignores him and walks past, stopping in front of her mother to offer her the cup and tells her to drink it. The Duke glares at her, unable to control her. He ends up screaming at her. His face is flushed with rage as he demands to know how dare she treat Rosanna that way after he brought in a child of unknown origins and uncertain whereabouts. She just smiles at him in return. Once again he is shocked by her and he thinks she smiles. She then reminds him she is a genius who takes after him. Right, Rosanna intervenes and tells her right. She looks a little shaken up by the fight and says her daughter has given it to her. How can she not drink it? He tells the Duke not to get too angry before taking a sip. The Duke looks worried. She states it's sweeter than she thought, a little bitter, and Annette interjects. It is delicious, right? Annette wishes her mother a quick recovery and says she will head back now and get some rest. After she leaves, the Duke wonders what she is thinking about. Just as she steps out of their vision, she starts shaking, her hands trembling. She wonders what she's doing now. However, she tries to convince herself it is fine. Even if she made some mistakes, she won't be scolded or experimented on. She responded well, it will be fine. She reminds herself she came here to do well, there's no way she will get sick because this is not a laboratory. When someone calls her name, she glances up, startled. It's Maria and Gold, both looking at her with concern. She tells herself she should act like an innocent child who knows nothing. She forces herself to smile and explains she was just surprised because it was her first time being scolded by an adult. She believes she cannot show her anxiety. On the other hand, Rosanna demands to know why he was so angry at her daughter. She reminds him she is her precious daughter that was barely found. He argues weakly that she was trying to feed him something strange. Rosanna smiles, stating still she brought it while thinking of her. How amazing and kind is she? She tells him she knows he's not used to it, but from now on he cannot be so cold-hearted. She cups his cheek and asks for his answer. Reluctantly, he replies understood. He then pauses, exclaiming that it looks like her coughing has stopped. Rosanna says he's right. It is easy to breathe, and she's not even feeling cold. This flabbergasts him because she never stops coughing this quickly. Rosanna looks down at her cup and wonders if this thing really works, or was it a coincidence? The Duke wonders if it was just a coincidence that Rosanna's symptoms improved. He recalls how she had a face of certainty, but then dismisses the thought, believing it cannot be that simple. He then orders Pedro to bring Mary and Gold. He wants to ask them if they noticed anything unusual. He then tells his wife to rest. She whispers Annette's name, wanting to tell him to apologize to her. But before she can, her eyes close and she falls asleep. He gently plays with a strand of her hair, reflecting on the situation. He knows this method is not good for either the child or Rosanna. Yet, he allows himself a moment to imagine that perhaps this child can really cure Rosanna's illness. He further admits there was a reason why Rosanna, who was healthy, became ill. He can't help but think if only that had not happened. A dozen or so years ago, the empire was in turmoil for a while by anti-aristocrat factions. The cause was the emperor's stupid rule. The previous emperor was the worst tyrant in history. Luxury and pleasure and a cruel nature that enjoyed war. Conscripting commoners into the army. When money was short, taxes were constantly raised. The nobles had no choice but to increase the taxes they levied on the peasants. Under the terrible rule, the people of the empire finally exploded. Unending war, rising taxes even when the nobles threatened them. The people of the empire had nothing to fear anymore. There were even nobles who cut off the heads of the people of the empire to scare them. This led to uprisings all over the place, and it turned into a cruel revenge which ended up children being kidnapped. An incident that happened out of a desire for revenge as the person lost his child, so he wanted the others to lose their children too. The number of children disappearing from noble families gradually increased. Among them was his family, too. A nanny who had been loyal to the family for a long time lost her son to the nobles. He couldn't have imagined in retaliation she would kidnap his child. Then the only son of a prestigious marquis was found dead. The nobles, led by the marquis, drew their swords and the prince, who was only about 16 years old. It was a coup. With the anger of the people of the empire accompanied by the anger of the nobles, the coup against the tyrant king ended up being successful. As the tyrant disappeared, the lost children began to return one by one. However, there were some children who could not. His daughter was one of them, and so was the son of the Argo family. Fortunately, the son of the Argo family was found not long after. Rosanna regained some of her vitality when she heard the news. It gave her hope that maybe their child was also somewhere. She thought she might still be alive, but he could not tell anyone that they found the charred remains of their child. They said she was found charred wearing the family necklace they gave her. How he could tell that to Rosanna? He had just seen hope and vitality well up in her face. Her, who had been waiting for death. He decided he had to keep it even more tightly hidden. He didn't want anyone to go through the same pain, or maybe even more. That is when he brought a girl with green hair. A girl of the same age as his daughter. He wondered if only he could find their child safely and bring her back. For a moment, he let himself think that it could be possible, but then he steeled himself and thought, no, it couldn't be. That child was fake. However, the resemblance, the words, there was no doubt that the child might have been switched. But he remembered Annette having the same light purple eyes as his. He let him consider that maybe she underwent an experiment. But there was no way her eye color could have changed. The Duke repeats what Gold informs him, that the tea was made by grinding dried rye plants and mixing it with sugar. He questions again to be sure that's how she made it. She says yes. He then asks what the child is doing now. She replies she is now back in her room to rest. She also lets him know the young lady seemed a little scared. She said it was the first time she got scolded. He gulps anxiously. He then looks away and mutters that is annoying, but still he stops her and asks if she knows what a kid likes. On the table, there are many sweets for her, and she sits there flustered. She thinks she was writing a letter to the geezer scientist. Now what is this sudden barrage of snacks? She looks up at the Duke and asks him what is all this. He dryly says he just picked it up, trying not to appear too affected or eager. She wonders where in the middle of the night. He then asks her how she's feeling. She giggles and tells him she's feeling great. She wonders if he's really sorry for getting angry earlier. She decides to act more like a daughter, and with bright eyes, she calls him father. She thanks him for all the treats on the table, explaining they are her favorites. She quickly adds that her father is the best, and suddenly he pauses. She wonders why he is frozen. She promises she will eat everything and again calls him the best. Seeing a red blush spread across his cheeks, she looks surprised, questioning his reaction. She quickly adds how happy she is to have such an amazing father and how he is a genius. She praises her father, who provides everything, as the greatest man in the world, leading the most wonderful family. She gasps. her eyes narrowing as she notices her father looking red and flustered. She thinks to herself, how could this be so easy? The next day, she thinks as a result of staying up all night last night with the sugar boost. She thought with her current ability, it is difficult to come into contact with the geezer scientist. She decides she needs to talk about business with the Duke first. She reminds herself it has just been a while since she came here. She cannot give orders as she is used to. She's aware she doesn't have enough money to deal with the mad scientist. First, she plans to steal the idea from the mad scientist for the future. She remembers his few ways to use magic stones. One magic stone can only have one attribute. If she puts the power of fire into a magic stone, it becomes a fire magic stone. However, just by lightly touching this magic stone, she can create a magic stone with two effects. If she melted and combined fire magic stones and water magic stones at a certain temperature, it is possible to create a new combination magic stone that easily gushes out warm water. She ponders she needs to score points with Duke Aubrey and present a business plan. As she is lost in her thoughts, the maid deliberately brings her foot forward, tripping her and causing her to fall to the ground. Puzzled, she thinks, what is going on? The maid dramatically exclaims, oh, is she okay? She should look ahead. They then tell her with creepy smiles she should have to see and learn so she can hold her head high. One of them also claims it looks like the status of the Duke has fallen, and another family has already offered her, so she thinks she should go there as she doesn't want to treat such a dirty child as her master. She thinks to herself this sucks. No matter where she goes, there is always this kind of harassment. She wonders if they're doing this because they expect her to cry. She lets them know she is not hurt. The maid says she apologizes. It is a mistake. She then asks them with sad eyes if she is dirty. The maid exclaims, of course she is not. She then lets them know then she will pass it on to her father that she said she got an offer to work for another family. She adds she will tell him that the maid will leave because she didn't want to take care of her who grew up as an orphan. She smiles at her and says, what does she think? Happy. The other maid claims that if she puts it like this one, won't the lady be hated then, as it was her who wasn't paying attention in the first place. She thinks this is a matter of speaking, that they have grown tired of hearing from mad scientists. She is no longer formal with them as she looks them dead in the eye and asks them if they think she is being a pushover now. She thinks who she is supposed to be loved by. The butler, the head maid, the servants, of course not, only by the Duke and the Duchess Aubrey. She then reminds them her father is the one who brought her here. Are they doubting her father? She claims she's a genius so she can tell her father exactly what happened. So if they are thinking of causing trouble, they better stop because her mother loves her and her father would never hate his own daughter. The maid snaps how she knows she is the real daughter. She sighs deeply and reminds her she keeps doubting her father and states that is why she's telling him everything as they are doubting her father. She also reminds them they are worried about her well-being. So let's see who gets the hate. Just as she turns to leave, they stop her, admitting they crossed the line and beg for mercy. She asks them if they think they can change their attitudes so quickly. Since they consider themselves not easy, she guesses she will make them beg. She remarks their smiling faces are even more annoying. Do they know how to spit on a smiling face? One of the maids nervously questions what should she do. She tells them there is a way to apologize to someone, right? Does she even have to tell them that? When they remain on their spot, she adds if she has to keep looking at them. The maid teeth clatters in anger as they kneel down in front of her and beg for forgiveness. Smiling pleasantly at them, she lets them know their apology was well received, and now she will go and tell her father about it nicely. Color drains from their faces, and they look shocked. She states she just taught them how to apologize, not that she forgives them. However, she adds, maybe she will feel like forgiving them if they kneel down every time they see her in the future. As she leaves, she thinks she really doesn't mean that. What if she is labeled as a new nuisance for nagging about this kind of thing? It is better to just scare them and live comfortably. The chefs are making food in the kitchen when she steps in. The chef asks her what brings her here. She is surprised he already recognized her as she hasn't even greeted him yet. He replies. He introduces himself as the assistant head chef of the mansion. She wonders if Duke Aubrey told him in advance, or did he find out on his own. She suddenly recalls that Duke Aubrey appreciates those who work hard. According to the novel, she stops when the strange word novel enters her mind. She thinks, there she goes again, using strange words and phrases lately. She reminds herself this is not the time for this. She requests the chef if she can borrow the kitchen for a bit. He smiles at her and explains that it's a bit difficult, but she cuts him off and makes a deal, offering him a secret recipe for how to make cheap meat taste like high-quality meat. This information was given to them by a barbarian delegation that participated in the peace conference about 3 years ago, and no one in the Empire knows about it. She thinks if she impresses the Duke with her cooking, it will be easier to earn the initial funds, and for some reason she feels like she has to impress him because it seems as if it is the calm before the storm. Later, there is a knock at the door of the Duke's study. He allows the visitor to enter, and the door opens to reveal her holding a dish. The butler standing nearby suggests, "Master, how about having a snack and taking a break?" The Duke, assuming it's Pedro who has arrived, says he has come when he was about to take a break, but he looks up when she calls him father. She greets him with a bright smile and encourages him to have a snack. He thinks by snack. In other words, she means she came here to complain. Duke Aubrey happened to see what happened in the hallway earlier. He thinks if the child did not know what to do, he was thinking of stepping in and helping, but she used his name to suppress them. He thinks so she came here to nag after all. He wants her to just tell him, and he will make sure those pests never set their eyes on her again. But to his surprise, the butler removes the lid and reveals the dish she has prepared for him. Surprised, he murmurs, "Is this beef stew?" He lifts his spoon to try it and thinks for some reason the chef cooked something he hasn't before. Now that he thinks about it, he missed a meal earlier. Looks like things just worked out. It smells good as he brings the spoon near his mouth to taste it. His eyes widen in shock as he takes his first bite. He realizes there is no unpleasant smell at all. Was beef always this soft to chew? Does the chef know how to cook like this? He thinks it looks like this was made with a lot of effort at the child's request. He then asks what that thing is next to it. She replies, "It's berry pie." She added plenty of blueberries along with other berries. Once again, he's taken aback because Rosanna is the only one who knows that he likes berries. Even the chef doesn't know that. He wonders if she told the child. He thinks there is no way Rosanna would tell about him. It's probably just a coincidence, and if Rosanna and the child had met, he would have received a report. He lies that the berries are not his favorite, but since his daughter brought it for him, he cannot help it. He asks Pedro to provide tea that goes well with the food. He thinks in hindsight it turned out to be for the better, as he wanted to ask her about the tea that she gave to Rosanna yesterday. Before that, he should ask her why she came, although it is obvious. He says his daughter is like him and knows her manners. She seems confused, so he clarifies he knows she came because she has a favor to ask. She looks embarrassed that he noticed. She admits there is actually something she would like to ask of him. He believes she is definitely planning to ask the employees to be fired and believes being meticulous is not a bad thing. She declares while studying she discovered a great secret. He says he will fire the employees right away. She looks confused, and then he looks surprised that she actually talked about business. He's stunned to silence for a moment. He then lies that he was just thinking of the people he would fire. It's no big deal. He then tells her to let him in on the details as he hates wasting his time on useless things. Without wasting time, she gets to the point and asks him if he heard the synthetic magic stones. He asks her what is that. She reveals it refers to a magic stone that can contain 2 opposing powers in one magic stone. After a moment of tense silence, he asks her if she's serious. 1 attribute per magic stone, that is an obvious preposition that even a 3-year-old knows. She agrees, but tells him if he figures out a way to mix those properties. She doesn't think commercializing them would be a completely absurd idea anymore. He tells her he would like to hear more about it. Quick to indulge him, she gets into deeper details. After some time of listening to her, he realizes they are not just empty claims. He thought it was the stubbornness of a child who hasn't learned much. But can't help but think, isn't the explanation pretty neat for a child of her age? He also realizes there are no holes in theory. He admits there is definitely a chance if they do, as she mentioned. He then asks if she got all this prepared to talk about the Mana Stone. She demands to know if it suited his taste. Again, to act like he is not very affected by her. He remarks it wasn't great, but it was worth eating. She looks kind of anxious, so he wonders if there is more. He claims, considering the sincerity she put into it, he will reward her accordingly. She then asks if she can request a favor from him. He thinks that she has a childish side, as he can't believe she would be anxious about suggesting to fire them, as he won't even let them enter a noble's house again. He will block every path for them. An evil smile comes to his face as he thinks of all the things he will do to them. She states once the business is confirmed and commercialized, could he give her 20% of the profits, while he promises he will fire them immediately. Once again, as he comprehends what she said, he is stunned into silence. She lets him know if 20% is difficult, then 10% is all fine. Looking at his expressions, she wonders if he's in that much hurry to fire his employees. She assures him if this is off topic, they can talk about it later. He thinks to himself, when on earth will she ask him to fire them? He asks her what topic and reminds her she is his only daughter and the princess of this country. He fixes her with a serious look and lets her know he hopes he won't forget that. However, she looks very anxious and he cannot help but want to know why she's so anxious. The Duke thinks it is time to speak up. His daughter must be feeling embarrassed. He assures her to never mind such worries and feel free to ask for anything. Hastily, she thanks him and announces she is leaving. He looks up first, then abruptly stands up and asks, is she leaving? She responds yes and requests him to experiment, and if it works, call her back. He whines that she's just going to leave like this. Doesn't she have something else to say to him? She seems confused. He presses her to think a little harder. He thinks, isn't there something she should ask this father? She appears puzzled at first, but then says, yesterday. He finally seems at ease and smiles. She goes on to tell him that she apologized to her mother for giving her a drink without permission. She also reveals the drink she gave mother yesterday was made from dried lotus flowers. But he asks, were not those weeds? She exclaims yes, it is not well known, but it has a slightly relieving effect on symptoms similar to mother's. She remembers meeting a pharmacist who used it like that before. She then wants him, but he shouldn't drink lotus flower tea too often, as he can develop tolerance, so he should only drink it when the pain is severe. He thinks since there is still no developed cure, it wouldn't be good to develop a tolerance to lotus flowers. And what if a cure is developed, but it's ineffective? She then thinks by then it will probably just be a dream, and right now even a proud peacock like her will eventually die from a sense of loss. She thinks about how in 5 years from now on Rosanna Aubrey will die and 2 years later Duke Aubrey would follow. She thinks she shouldn't be tamed by this, as she also has 6-7 years left at most. Her body is engraved with ancient languages. Even in her previous life, before 7 years had passed, she died as ancient languages spread throughout her body. She then bids her father goodbye and leaves, leaving him feeling flustered. He thinks to himself, is this how it really ends? It's over before it even began. The butler appears behind him, and he turns to him, asking what he is doing. He states he said it didn't suit his taste, so he was going to remove the food and the tea and was thinking of eating it himself. He rushes to tell him to put it down and leave, he is tired. On her way back, Annette thinks she did her best to make it, but she guesses the food wasn't great. She wonders if she gets complacent with her skills, even though they are good enough to impress even a mad scientist. Well, she has been eating food made from good ingredients since she was a child. She pauses when she comes face to face with the sole successor of Duke Aubrey. In the Aubrey Duchy, Duke Aubrey has a sole successor. She notices how he has green hair resembling his father's, sophisticated purple eyes, and a youthful face that makes him appear around 13. She suddenly remembers after the downfall of the Aubrey Duchy, the protagonist, a wandering knight, meets the female lead with the power of rust. Confused again, she points out strangely enough she's starting to recall information she did not know before. And what's with the male lead and female lead? What do they even mean? She has only exchanged glances with him at the dining table. Smiling, she greets him. He remarks, so it is her, the substitute. At first she looks surprised, but then her whole demeanor shifts. She comments, so he's that kind of person. She thinks with an arrogant and handsome face resembling Duke Aubrey. His eyes betray a demeanor that does not smile. She can see there is clearly tension and hostility between them. She moves past him, abruptly announcing that she's leaving, thinking to herself that he's making her more tired than she already is. She stops in her tracks when he comments that, even when she dresses up, she still looks tacky. He further adds they brought someone who was supposed to be his sibling, but she is just plain and unremarkable. When she remains quiet, he teases she has nothing to say. She claims no. He's the one who talks a lot. She then asks can she go now that he's done with the evaluation. She is a busy person, so she doesn't have time to play with him. He asks what did she just say. She replies she's doing the same because he's also brief in his words. She remembers, just as she has said before, there are certain people she needs to keep an eye on, and she needs to be liked only by the Duke and the Duchess. She wonders if she needs to cater this miniature too. She then remembers the Duke loves his wife more than she thought, so he won't recklessly throw her away, even for her health. She concludes the cries of this child are no threat to her at all. She tells him she doesn't need to act nice to him, so why would she have to pretend like one? He asks her. Doesn't she get this situation? Is she brain dead? Why should he care about impressing her? She believes because he's the biological son and heir of the house. She thinks to herself in this life that will end faster than anyone else's. She has decided on two things. She lets him know it is a mistake if he thinks she will grovel to him for that reason. She has no intention of doing so. The first thing is revenge. She adds he doesn't know how much power he has, but she hopes he realizes he cannot drive her away. The second thing is her freedom. She reminds him if she were to disappear, the Duchess would be greatly shocked and might even collapse. He doesn't want to make her suffer like that, does he? She is determined to pursue revenge thoroughly and live as she pleases. Living without regrets and dying like that is her goal. She thinks she is not someone who will let herself be tripped up by a mere child like him. When she looks up, her eyes widen in surprise because he's glaring at her so hard that it seems he will snap her in two. She wasn't expecting this reaction and realizes she made a mistake because he seems to care for the Duchess better than she thought. Just the assumption that she might collapse is enough to make him this angry. He suddenly grabs her collar, pulling her and leaning to her face threateningly, however, stops when someone calls Annette's name. It's Rosanna who asks them what is wrong. He looks startled while she sighs in relief, thinking she's alive. She rushes to her mother and hugs her tightly. He thinks, what is with the act? Their mother also calls for Enos to come and join them in the hug. It remains standing for some time. She thinks he's even more stubborn than she thought, but he then joins them for the hug. Her mouth drops open in shock as she wonders what is wrong with this kid, and where did that arrogant demeanor she saw earlier go? Enon freaks out when his mother says she saw him reaching out to Annette earlier, what he was doing. Enos starts sweating, so she decides to intervene. She smiles at her mother and tells her she was just exchanging greetings with brother. Further explaining, he seemed to reach out to remove dust from her hair. Rosanna exclaims that he has become such a splendid older brother. She expresses she is so happy to have such a splendid older brother like this. Enos looks embarrassed as he blurts out there was dust on her hair. He then asks his mom what's the occasion for her to be outside today. Is her health okay? She smiles at him and assures him she is feeling fine today. Annette thinks it seems like drinking herbal tea has an effect. Rosanna then announces she is going to meet their father now, so he should take care of his younger sibling. They smile brightly at their mother, but just as she turns, their smiles disappear. Annette returns to leave too. He asks her where she is going. She replies, to the room. Didn't she say she had a lot to do? She adds there is really no need to introduce the mansion to her. His eyes don't hold the same hostility from earlier, but he asks her does she really think that just because they act like this, they can become a family? She wonders why he said something like that. She is the person who knows best that it can't happen. Suddenly it clicks. He's worried that she will take his place. That's why he's saying that to protect his own position. She's amused and thinks how foolish. It is kind of cute. Smiling, she tells him no. She can assure him she has never dreamed of such a thing. She thinks about family and love that was a dream she abandoned the day she was betrayed by a mad scientist. She further declares she will never be family with them. He looks confused and murmurs, "What did she say?" She repeats again that even if he begged her to, she would never become family with them, so he shouldn't worry about it. It's not happening. She ponders it is ridiculous to talk about family when she only has 6 to 7 years left. She intends to use this family solely as a means of revenge. She advises him to put on a good act in front of Mother, and not to behave clumsily like earlier. She believes if she had such feelings, she wouldn't just stand by knowing the people in this house are going to die. She believes family is nothing but an illusion. No matter how hard a person tries, no matter how much they seek love, unless they share the same blood, it's all fantasy. And even if they share the same blood and still end up like this, perhaps family was never about believable affection to begin with. Just the thought of herself who once sought love desperately makes her sick to her stomach. The next day on the dining table, the Duke scolds his son that his etiquette is worse than his younger sister, who returned not long ago. He adds he should have been told to handle the tableware without making any noise. The son apologizes. Annette thinks, of course, she has truly learned noble etiquette, but this is uncomfortable. The Duke then also expresses his disdain over hugging his mother. Doesn't he know that she is sick? How could he behave so irresponsibly? He apologizes once again. His eyes flicker with sadness. This is bothersome to Annette. She believes this is what happens in a household with sick people. The Duke and Duchess quarrel, and Enos, who should be enjoying love, grows up lonely. She now knows that's why he was so sensitive, as it seems he lacks confidence in himself, as he doesn't have memories of being loved. Because it's not like they don't love him. No, the Duke loved him, even in his rampage. He never attacked his son, just hurt himself to the point of self-destruction. Suddenly, something comes to her mind. She startles in shock as she realizes something is off. No matter how much she thinks about it, it feels like her memories are jumbled and mixed up. She admits vivid memories suddenly surfacing. This phenomena has occurred more than once with her. She jolts out of her thoughts when her father calls her name. He asks her what she is thinking about during the meal. She responds it's just that she's starting to feel full. This catches both of the men's attention because she has been barely eating. She keeps a smile on her face but is uncomfortable with their reaction. She lets her father know if eating so little makes him uncomfortable, she would eat more, but he says never mind and asks did she usually eat that little, even at the orphanage? She replies yes, because if a person eats too much, their heart does not work well and their body gets sluggish, and they still have to attend classes and do the tasks assigned for the day. So if their body gets sluggish, they can't do them. She then adds there is no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Both of them look surprised because she is very young for such wisdom. She reveals the orphanage was a place where discipline was certain. There was a middle-aged man named N who would give rewards for good behavior and punishments for bad behavior. She realizes she has long forgotten the feeling of being full. She then asks him now that she has finished her food, can she leave? The Duke lets her know starting a week from now on, a private tutor will come, so she should make sure to attend those classes. She acknowledges it. He looks nervous as he reminds her she never asked what things he liked. She is catched off guard and wonders what this is all about. Chapter. The Duke asks her, isn't she curious about what classes she's taking, who she's meeting, or when she's going? He demands to know why she doesn't show any basic curiosity or questions. There is a short pause before she asks him if anything would change if she was curious. This catches him off guard, and he finally answers of course not. She asks him then why would she bother being curious about it if nothing changes. He stares at Annette for a moment before dismissing the question and asking her to forget he even mentioned it. She then asks him if she can also go take a look at her classes. Looking confused, he repeats her words. She looks embarrassed as she reveals it's her first time going out. In her past life, and in this life, she really hasn't gone out anywhere. She groans, thinking to herself she is a bit embarrassed. When he remains silent, she adds it's okay if it is not allowed.
Hey!
He asks her who said it is not allowed. She thought someone would say it is not allowed. As she is ready to express her gratitude, he cuts her off, saying but he has something to do today. She states okay, she sees. However, he adds if it is tomorrow, there's no reason he cannot take her. She smiles, asking, really? He assures her that he is allowing it. He then closes his eyes. He groans in frustration, then opens his eyes and fixes her with a look, conveying that he must permit it. Flabbergasted, she looks at him and wonders, what does he want her to do? Suddenly, she becomes tense when she thinks surely he's not going to ask her to do that, right? She believes he really might allow it if she's free tomorrow. She then calls out to him. He looks at her dryly. She plasters a bright smile on her face as she admits he must be busy, but would he go to the capital with her tomorrow? He looks frustrated as he answers. It is annoying, but he cannot help it, but she shouldn't expect anything special. However, both she and her brother look shocked at his agreeing so easily. He thinks no matter how many people in this world ask of him, it is his daughter's request. He cannot help it. Enos frowns, thinking isn't this person a bit too much? While Annette looks nervous as she thinks to herself, she's at a loss. After that she got up and left the room, but she came out with a strange feeling of doubt. Enos rushes after her, accusing her of enjoying fake drama and getting father's attention. He further asks her if she's really trying to become a real family by acting like this. He then adds in a vulnerable voice father has never once taken him to the capital. He thinks didn't. She thinks, didn't she assure him from the beginning that she's on his side, and the misunderstanding is because of the Duchess, and she is in a position where she has to show her respect. For a moment, she lets her consider that she could explain her position. However, who knows what other pretext this might create. She decides to resolve this as it is. She tells him she doesn't want to engage in meaningless arguments with him. She believes Duke Aubrey crushes Enos in his own way, so there is no need to dwell on it. She exclaims since she has plans tomorrow. It is difficult, but 2 days later she will show him how much his father loves him. She promises she will prove it. Looking confused, he blurts out what she is talking about. She sighs deeply and states if she proves it, will he pay attention to her? She then inquires to find out if father has a place he walks to every day. She knows well when the sincerity of someone who cannot be honest comes out. He lets her know there is a pond in the garden of their mansion, and he walks around there at least once a day. She thinks quite fitting for the Lord of Green. She declares all right then, let's meet at the point after breakfast. He whispers what exactly is she up to? Is she trying to deceive him again? She glances back at him and tells him it is proof to ensure brother doesn't get jealous of her. She thinks it is bothersome, but if it's for a better future, it is a necessary process. After that, she leaves him standing there. She then tells herself to set aside the hassle for tomorrow and to organize what keeps popping up suddenly. Suddenly, those strange words come to her mind again: novel, male protagonist, female protagonist. Annette definitely knows about the past and future of the Duke of Aubrey. Before regression, she surely read through the newspapers left by the mad scientist without missing a single one. But was Duke Aubrey's past written there as well? It must have been, since his death was prominently prophesied. However, she can't recall how did she know that he was the third son. She also knows that he had a tough time since childhood. It is the fact that he does not trust people easily. So how could she be so sure that he loves Enos Aubrey? No matter how closely she examined the newspapers, surely she cannot know things that were not written there. But that is the thing. How does she know now that he hurt himself to avoid hurting Enos Aubrey? She cannot help but question herself about where did she learn this information. She doesn't remember anything specific right now, but in the past that she knows, someone added an explanation. Suddenly, a light starts emitting from somewhere. She then realizes it is coming from the pattern. She dwells on what this is. Somehow something is happening. Suddenly, her surroundings change and she's on her knees. She looks around trying to find out where she is. She clearly felt her soul being sucked in. However, what is this creepy white space? She flinches when she feels someone's presence behind her. She looks over her shoulder, only to find a black shadow. Suddenly, a piercing and terrifying scream fills the air, causing her to clamp one hand over her ear in pain. It's so loud and unbearable, as if someone is screaming directly into her ear with a microphone. She wonders in shock what could be making such a deafening noise. The voice in her ear says, "Oh, he made a mistake. Did he speak too loudly, human?" Surprised, she looks up and asks, "What did he say?" She believes even an ant's voice could be bigger than that. He states it is hard to adjust. "How about now?" She replies that is okay. She asks him what is going on here. He declares he's finally glad to meet her. When she demands to know who he is and where this is, he tells her not to be so wary. He's the administrator, this is it. Once again, she repeats what does he mean? She doesn't understand at all. He shrugs and replies with a two-word response, archives room. She's so lost she doesn't even know if they are speaking or not. He then tells her it is the only room in this world that only she can enter. She confesses while she still doesn't understand. Looking around, she exclaims there is nothing here. The shadow asks why it isn't there and urges her to look closely, promising there is. This time, when she looks, there's a library with shelves around her filled with books. He lets her know they are the pages that contain the truth of the world. He suggests she read them. They all look the same, so she wonders, what is she supposed to read? However, the book in her hand, unlike the other books, the front and back cover colors are different. The shadow encourages her to read it, saying it will be interesting. She thinks at this point she is not surprised by anything anymore. In the book, there's something written that happened in August 2019. It states after being defrauded of their entire fortune, they were fatally hit by a bus while jaywalking. This is really the worst. Her eyes narrow as she focuses on the words and tries to comprehend what it means. She realizes by X it means the imperial calendar month, 8-day. The shadow tells her the rest is written in an ancient language, so she cannot read now. Her eyes widen in shock as she gazes at the shadow. The shadow further adds the fun part she was talking about starts now. He then whispers in her ear, repeatedly encouraging her to look ahead. She looks annoyed, but ends up complying. When her gaze falls on the book, she is surprised because it's moving on its own. There is another thing that happened on February 17, 2016. It states today was the best. It is further written that the Duke Aubrey is so cool, he stabbed himself in the leg to save his son. And such parents only exist in novels. Someone expresses their sadness over the fact that Duke Aubrey is not going to appear anymore. Someone also claims their family, who are like their enemies, only think about how to take their money all the time. Confused, she turns the pages herself, while the shadow from the distance watches her. What Annette has read so far, it seems like the owner of this diary-like document is writing a review after reading a novel called Green Eyes. She thinks while a normal book review would not be an issue, the name House of Duke Aubrey is explicitly mentioned in this review. She reveals the phrase "adopted a lost daughter" is jarring enough on its own. However, she wonders what the protagonist is again, and who is Ki. Suddenly, a jolt of electricity surges through her hand, making her pull it back abruptly. The shadow informs her that it happened because she tried to see too far ahead. She cannot see that much yet. When she demands to know what that is, he honestly replies it was her life. To be precise, this is her lifetime with the most intense moments recorded. She doesn't understand, so he clarifies of course she wouldn't know as this is her past life. Seeing one's own past life is ordinary forbidden, but she is one of those special cases who have lived multiple lives. He further reveals in a nutshell all her numerous past lives are recorded here, even though she does not remember them. Her soul does. In fact, the records room exists for everyone, but only a few can enter, for example those who have died once with the key. She looks pale, as if it is too much for her to digest the revelations at once. She repeats, "The key." He points out the one on her wrist and lets her know it's a forbidden magic. When she averts her gaze, looking nervous, he tells her not to look so scared. He's on her side. He playfully nudges her nose with a light touch, a teasing gesture. Her eyes widen in surprise. He then tells her it's already time to go, so he guesses it is over, and they will have to leave the rest of the story for the next time. Before leaving, he lets her know they will have plenty of time, so she should take care and refers to her as a partner. He waves at her and tells her they say it's best to keep the first meeting short. As she returns to consciousness, she finds herself lying on the bed. Slowly, she sits up, her eyes reflecting exhaustion as she surveys her surroundings. At that moment, she thinks this is the worst. The next morning, Gold shows her a beautiful dress and asks her how about this one. She doesn't look too impressed, but forces a smile on her face and assures her it is pretty. Mary suggests the slightly calmer navy blue line is also nice, too. However, Gold disagrees and thinks this one is better. Both the sisters glare at each other. Annette thinks to herself she's sure she didn't ask for their help in clothes. She nervously tells them she should try this one first. Annette muses she thought Mary was like that, but she did not know Gold was also like that. As she dons her dress for the day, a delightful gasp escapes Gold, her eyes sparkling with admiration. Mary also chimes in, remarking it matches her emerald hair so well. She also adds, as expected since she has master's hair color, she can pull off similar shades very well. Annette thinks with all this praise, it looks like her hard work looking like Duke's daughter was worth it. She smiles at them and asks if she looks that much like her father. Gold replies yes, and it is really heartwarming to have such a beloved person return safely. She says thanks, but then admits to feeling guilty about it. Both Gold and Mary look at her in surprise, wondering what she means. She assures them she'll be back soon. On her way, she thinks she has not had time to process the information properly, and she passed out in a daze only to wake up the next morning. She also remembers she had made an arrangement with Aubrey Duke to go out. Her mind then begins to wander, pondering the identity of the person named Kidai. She has learned that the world is a novel, and she's one of the characters in a book titled Green Eyes, a story she read in a past life. That is, if what the figure said was true. She wonders if that means So Ki was the one who was originally supposed to be the daughter and the heroine. Come to think of it, she seems to remember reading a newspaper article before her regression that said Aubrey Duke had adopted a daughter. She believes she has stolen someone else's place involuntarily. She snaps out of her thoughts when someone scolds her that she is late keeping him waiting. When she looks up, it is Duke Aubrey. He admits she looks quite impressive today. She smiles at him and thanks him, believing it is all thanks to Father. A heavy silence descends upon them, leaving her feeling perplexed. She looks up at him, only to find him staring at her with anticipation. She wonders why he has suddenly grown so quiet. He narrows his eyes at her, causing her jaw to drop in realization. She understands the implications. He wants her to compliment him more. She thinks Duke Aubrey turned out to be much more childish than she had expected, so while the probability of her crazy theory being true is high. Reluctantly, she calls out to him and praises him that he looks even more splendid and dashing today. Arrogant as ever, he replies back, he's just the same as usual. She muses he wished for this right. In the carriage, she darts a glance at him and thinks he could have easily declined to accompany her, especially since he is so busy with his work in the carriage business. Judging by all the demands he has been making, she realizes it seems that Duke Aubrey really missed having a daughter after all. However, she believes even in that case she is just an imposter, so if she acts spoiled, he will kick her out. He then asks her if there's any place she would like to go. She thinks to herself she just wanted to stroll around and enjoy her freedom. However, the words come out of her mouth are the demands about going to a clothing store or a jewelry shop or maybe getting a snack. He questions, is that what she wishes to do? She says yes, father, but thinks to herself it doesn't matter where. Don't children enjoy these things? However, contrary to her expectations of a peaceful outing, she was once again reminded that this world revolves around money and power. In the shop, she is freaking out as she calls out to her father. She reminds him she merely expressed admiration for that pink dress. So would he not consider purchasing the entire toy shop and showering her with an assortment of pink dresses? He plays with a strand of her hair as he replies, his daughter is so bold. He believes this is precisely how money should be utilized. He smiles at her, but it doesn't reach his eyes. She thinks, judging by the frown on his face, he is clearly not amused, and not just slightly. She wonders what on earth she did to offend him. She just asked for a snack while teasing him a little. On the other hand, Duke Aubrey muses it is absurd to think that his daughter is thinking just having snacks would be enough. He asks her next was a jewelry store. He thinks, poor girl who's already freaking out quickly blurts out actually, no, it's not that. She admits she just wants to enjoy the scenery while walking with him. She grabs hold of his dress and confesses she has never been to the capital before. He looks at her slightly concerned, then he says, well, if his daughter asks like that, he cannot refuse. She thinks she didn't even beg that much. She says yes, let's go back to the carriage and practically bolts out of the shop, thinking they should change their location before he changes his mind. On their way to the carriage, she asks her father if they could cancel the purchases they made today. He glares at her as he states, is she asking him, a duke, to cancel orders at those stores now and to lose face? She replies no, she just thought it would be nice to give them as gifts or donations to the people around them. From the expressions on his face, it can be clearly seen he's not interested. He begins to argue, but his objections falter when he notices the sadness reflected on his daughter's face. She admits she just feels sorry for all this stuff. She further reminds him she won't be here in around 5 years, so she feels wasteful buying things she won't be able to use. He says she can take them all, there's no reason not to. She asks how she can possibly. The clothes won't fit her anymore since she will grow out of them. He tells her to then just throw them away. She thinks she's not making any sense, but then he stands up abruptly telling her they have arrived. Once he steps out of the carriage, he offers his hands to her and tells her to give her his hand and step out. She places her hand on his and remembers he held his hand when she got in the carriage earlier, too. She guesses he has better manners than she expected. He walks ahead of her. She also notices that he is always walking ahead of her. She realizes they seem to be falling into place gradually. After a moment of hesitation, she slowly reaches for her father's hand. Just as she's about to grasp it, a sudden commotion nearby captures both of their attention. The Duke groans, wondering what trouble is brewing now. However, Annette is standing frozen in place in the shock. There is a man that shouts there is evidence that the mad scientist is openly alive. The Duke calls for Annette, however, she's busy looking at an experimental subject created for killing and combat. A chimera. The man complains that he bought it because it was said to be a rare creature. Annette believes that must be a chimera. An experiment created by a mad scientist before he invented a chimera for killing and fighting a living being created by deceiving God and disregarding life. She reveals in the beginning there was a lot of talk about its pitiful life due to lack of intelligence and the characteristics of following only the owner. The creature began to be distributed. She clenches her fist as she realizes this thing is still rebelling without any consciousness and looks like this guy was a failure too. The creature whines from inside the cage. This pulls her out of her thoughts, and she realizes she was staring at it for so long. Her father asks her she has anything to wish for and promises her he will make sure to grant all her wishes. She wonders what else is he intending to buy. Already all the shops robbed them. She assures him she likes what her father bought her today, and that is enough for her. He tries to say something, but she interjects, telling him it was her first time seeing the capital and walking around freely. It was really nice because it was her first time having someone hold her hand. She wonders what else she should say, being a commoner or something, but realizes that is enough for now. She states it is all thanks to her father, so they should head home now. She just wanted to see the market like usual. He cannot believe she's just satisfied with this, but agrees with her to go back and tells her he had no choice but to hold his hand since she likes it. He holds it again, but this time so tight that she groans in discomfort. However, just as she strides past the pitiful creature in the cage, her gaze falls upon it, and it looks profoundly sad. She thinks about the creature abandoned by this mad scientist. It would be an exaggeration to say that creature looks similar to her old self. On the other hand, Enos is waiting in the garden. He thinks to himself she told him to come, and he did, but just to prove that his father loves him more. However, he still thinks what kind of nonsense is that? He contemplates his father, who always gave him a stern look. This time he even took his fake kid with him to see the capital. He thinks, what does a fake who monopolizes the love of his father and mother know? He believes she dared to imitate his younger sister, who had eyes as pretty as violets. How dare he fool his sick mother? He recalls holding his younger sister in his arms as she stared up at him with beautiful violet eyes of hers. He cannot help but consider the possibility of his sister being alive. When he looks up, he finds Annette in front of him. He admits he thought it was pointless and was just about to go back. She asks him if he doesn't want to know whether his father loves him or not. He answers that his father does not love him. On top of that, he even looks like he actually believes it. Annette thinks to herself she's tired. Come to think of it, it was almost time. She asks him if he knows what is the easiest way to win someone's love. What? He inquires. She states a situation of crisis to the point where they cannot even control their emotions. She darts a glance at his way, and he looks taken aback. Suddenly she grabs his collar and pulls him closer, whispering in his ear that he is going to die. She lets him know in advance this is just a mistake that happened when they were playing. He asks her what she is doing. She lets him know this is absolutely not his fault. He tells her to stop it. She replies she will. Smiling brightly at him, she mentions when his father calls his name first and saves him, she will win the bet. She then pushes him into the lake. She tells him if she wins, he would stop bothering her. However, she jumps after him too. She realizes the water is dark, and it's much wider and deeper than she thought, and it seems cold. She calls Enos stupid, and thinks it is not a shame for not being able to swim right. The Duke is rushing towards them. She wonders what he's scared of. She won't tell anyone. Before the Duke can reach them, Enos has already emerged from the water on his own. The Duke blurts out, asking if he is okay and if he was injured, then immediately instructs his men to call a doctor right away. Enos tries to explain to his father, but falls silent when he looks at his expressions. Duke Aubrey snaps at his son, what he was thinking. He reminds him he is scared of water, so was he wishing to die. He whispers in disbelief he knew that. The Duke says what does he think? He doesn't know that and tells him the doctor will be here soon, so he should lie down. Enos realizes he lost. He has never seen his father's expression like this before. The Duke asks him again how on earth he fell into the water. This jolts his memory, and he realizes that Annette is still in the water. He states it was a mistake while playing with a net. He let his father know they were playing and then fell in the water. Color drains from the Duke's face as he realizes she is still under the lake. Cursing under his breath, he jumps into the lake. Annette thinks it is cold. She saw Aubrey running towards them, so Enos must have been saved. She thinks he was running ahead, as if he couldn't even bother to see her, and she was just trying to quickly get rid of something annoying. But what the hell? She never thought she would realize in the water that she's not good at swimming either. She murmurs she has won. However, another question arises in her mind. How did she know that Enos could not swim? She remembers there was no article that says he couldn't swim. It is amazing how much information comes to her mind, even though it's not from her memory. She lets herself consider what if she dies right now. No more misery, no more revenge. It would just become more comfortable. Just as she closes her eyes, the Duke reaches her and pulls her to safety. Sitting on the grass, her eyes widen as she realizes she has survived. The Duke looks deeply worried for his children. Under her breath, she murmurs an apology, explaining that she was just playing with her brother. She then darts a glance at Enos. She wonders, why does he look like this? Was this too harsh on a kid who couldn't even swim? She further adds this was done after sufficiently calculating the distance. The Duke sighs in exasperation and tells his children they will talk about it later. He let them know he will ask the doctor to take a look, so now they can go back to their room and quickly wash with warm water. They both say yes in union. Later in the room, sitting on the bed, she repeats for 5 days. She needs to lie down for 5 days in this room, even though she wasn't hurt. Mary glares at her with teary eyes as she instructs her to just lie down. The doctor reminds her something big could have happened. She thinks to herself. She guesses she was looking down on her position as the only princess in the empire. She finally agrees. Annoyed, she glances at Enos, who looks at her with sadness in his eyes. She thinks everything is fine, but wonders why she has to be in the same room as him. She can see the expressions on his face and wonders what kind of change of heart did he have to make that face, but tries to convince herself. It will be good, she guesses, and she will get used to it soon. She also admits it was her miscalculation. 4 days later, she's frowning as she reveals they did not let her go out for 3 whole days, and on top of that, she has been imprisoned under the eye of Duke Aubrey. Eating, changing clothes, from play to class, all in the name of nursing. She did not know it would go this far, and this is getting on her nerves now. Besides everything else, the worst one is, she asks her brother why he's looking at her like that. He blurts out he wasn't looking at her. Annette reveals this is what they have been doing. They watch her even while she eats, and when she calls them out they pretend otherwise. When she said she was feeling better, the Duke ignored her and asked her if she was a doctor. However, if she stays like this even for a little more time her butt will melt. She jolts out of her thoughts when the Duke comments her complexion has improved a lot. Duke Aubrey tells her he will come back after work and tells her to stay in her room. She thinks to herself, just stop coming. After he leaves, she feels relieved. Suddenly Enos murmurs what she was thinking about, and there shouldn't be a bet on such a risky situation. She wonders if there was a complaint, and even if it was, he can keep on complaining. She states she is sorry about that, but it was a well thought out plan so he did not die. But she was almost dead, he states. Confused, she looks up at him. She admits she made some mistakes, but he cuts her off, asking what she was thinking when she couldn't even swim. She thinks to herself she just wanted to get away from him. Silence falls over them, and once he composes himself, he says in a small voice, because of that she almost died. A tear slips from his eye. She exclaims in disbelief that he's crying now. He covers his face and mumbles, "Who's crying?" She thinks to herself, what does he mean? Obviously, it's him, Enos Aubrey. She points out that this proves his father's love for him. He agrees, but adds that he also proved his love for her when he jumped into the pond to save her. She dismisses it as mere courtesy, thinking no one can die in the Duke's backyard. Frustrated, he corrects her, saying that's not the case. He announces he has never seen his father run so desperately. That means their father cares about her too. He also apologizes for calling her fake. She replies, "No, that is fine. It is the truth anyway." However, he declares he has decided he specially acknowledges her as his younger sister. She tells him there is no need. As promised, she won't bother him anymore. As arrogant as his father, he claims he knows it is an honor for her because it is not easy to have a cool and amazing brother like him. She literally gets déjà vu from it. She tells him to do what he wants then. On the dining table, Rosanna states she heard they both caught a cold after falling into the water while playing. She asks them if they are both fine now. Both siblings assure her they are fine now. She sighs in relief. Annette thinks it has been so long since she ate at a table. After taking a few bites, she's already full and wants to stop eating. When she puts the spoon back on the table, her mother notices it and asks her if she's already done eating. She's eating so little. Is the food note to her taste? She assures her the food is delicious. She reveals her body becomes sluggish and she feels sleepy if she eats too much. It was troublesome since there was always a shortage of workers at a daycare center. They all look at her with shock and worry. She quickly realizes that blurting out things like that isn't exactly a great idea. She then adds, but now she is back home and her parents are here. She guesses she should eat a lot. Rosanna tells her not to push herself too hard. Later, she's laying down on her bed because she has already eaten 5 times more than usual, and she is very full. She was also planning to go out today as she is concerned about that chimera. If possible, she would like to leave it alone, but she still seems worried. But then she reminds herself, is there any point in thinking about it? She should go out first. She calls for Mary and Gold and instructs them both to come inside for a moment. When they ask her if she needs something, she replies yes. Can she go out now? Mary asks her where she wishes to go. She tells them she wants to go to the capital. Gold informs her they will start preparing now. And other things. Annette thinks that is easy. She thought she couldn't go out without Duke Aubrey's order. Later, she's stepping out of the carriage and contemplates they are here this instant since they go by carriage. She tells Mary she has business in this store, so could she wait here? Mary does not look pleased with her demand and tells her they should go together, but she assures her it is fine. She will be back soon. After all, she can see her from here, right? Mary pleads with her to come as soon as she is done with the business. When she steps in the shop, she realizes it is weak. They did not manage it properly. She realizes that is the reason Mary and Cold are reluctant. 2 sets of identical eyes watch her carefully from outside. Looking around, she finally spots the chimera. The owner of the shop claims she is precious. She has great eyes, introducing her to a new rare animal. He states he is currently in the process of domesticating it, but it's the perfect breed to tame to her taste. She comments that his condition isn't looking good. Looks like he is dying. Stunned, he quickly denies the accusation, saying there's no way it just woke up not long ago. She thinks what a joke and asks since the condition isn't that good, how much he's selling it for. He says it is an expensive breed, so he is selling it for about 5 million dirk. She is shocked and thinks the monthly cost of living for a family of 4 is 5 million dirk, and a 5 million from a store that violates these basic hygiene laws. Despite her rising fury, she plasters a smile on her face and asks if he got permission properly, and reminds him a permit is required to import rare animals. He cannot just sell it anywhere, so he should first show her permit. When he doesn't show her, she exclaims it is really illegal, and there is a reward for reporting it to the security. He blurts out that cannot be and ends up on 3 million. However, she points out that the animal looks like it is in pain, and there would be hospital bills. She doesn't have much pocket money, so she can give him less than 3 million dirk. He points out in that case he will be left with nothing then. She nods in understanding and states all right, she will give him 3 million dirk. He asks her if she is being serious. She smiles at him and says why not. She would report it to the security, get the reward and come back. That man is quick to lower it to 300,000 dirk instead. She turns her back on him and says, "Is that so? She will be back in a week." Confused, he questions if she is not taking it now. She looks back and questions what if her father gets angry and ruins his store when she takes a sick animal with her. Can he handle it? She thinks to herself, of course, she won't tell him. Even Duke Aubrey could not be bothered for that reason. The truth is, she doesn't have money with her. She feels like she's going into debt to sell clothes or jewelry that are not hers, and it feels bad to ask Duke Aubrey for pocket money. She declares 1 week. Until then, his job is to make sure the Chimera stays healthy. She is determined to make money by any possible means within a week. She thinks that Chimera cannot be used as a human control weapon, and it is a creature with very high intelligence. She plans to train this Chimera, so it will listen to her well and become her good ally after. It's a dark night outside the palace as a shooting star streaks across the sky. The maid mentions how that's about it, and that this is the end of her report. The Duke tells her well done. He continues to mention how the girl left right after she finished her meal and had mentioned how she was going to see a beast. The maid says that is correct. To this the Duke scoffs, mentioning how if the girl had wanted this so badly, she should have just said so. The maid mentions how sensitive the Duke is to hints and how he must have a lot on his mind. She wonders if he'll go visit the lady soon. The Duke says perhaps, before saying they never really know when or where the young lady will go, so the maid must take good care of her. He mentions how the child has been entrusted to the maid since she's among the green wind. The maid says yes, and that she will take her leave now. She then disappears from the room in a flash. After she is left, the Duke ponders about how the green wind are knights that are fiercely loyal to this family. They are knights capable of overwhelming 20 soldiers in one moment. He thinks about how it was a half impulse to add Mary and Gold to this group, before then recalling how his child can't honestly say what she wants. The Duke is looking forward to seeing her return back with the food made by a chef, as if it were a bribe. Someone then calls to His Grace asking if they may come in. He allows it. The door opens and wind flies right through, pushing his hair back. The Duke tells Shatran that he's already told her to be mindful about her behavior in this mansion. Shatran says yes and asks if the Duke called for her. The Duke mentions how the food has been great these days, and especially the meat. Shatran says it's thanks to the Duke and says that he surely didn't call her here just to say that. The Duke then mentions how she must know his daughter has returned. The Duke mentions how his daughter might come visit Shatran to ask for a favor like last time. Shatran asks if that's really true and when his daughter will come. The Duke says he doesn't know and mentions how it's a bit heartwarming. He tells Shatran to prepare food that isn't so heavy this time. This confuses Shatran, who mentions she was asleep that time and didn't prepare the food. The Duke yells in shock and asks who the sous chef was then. Shatran asks what the Duke is even talking about and tells him the young miss made it herself. This leaves the Duke totally stunned. Shatran mentions how the meat was more tender and flavorful due to the recipe that was given to the talented young miss. She continues to say no way and asks if the Duke thought she made it. The Duke tells her to leave, but Shatran asks him if he did that nervous tick even at the young miss's cooking. The Duke reiterates for her to leave and asks if she wants to be fired or something. As Shatran leaves, she laughs and tells him to go ahead and give it a try. She asks him where he'll even find a replacement chef that can deal with his picky behavior. The Duke then recalls how he told his daughter the food was strange and how he didn't like it, and how he was only eating since it was brought to him, despite it being average. The Duke now wonders if he has ever regretted something this much before. We later see panels showing parts of the room. Our female lead is now looking into a mirror as she wonders what she can sell. She notes how suspicious it would be if she were to break in through the underworld path, so she should just quit that. However, there's not much she can sell out of what's left. Her hair then dangles down, as she then thinks about how she'd been using that good soup as of late and her skin's gotten even smoother. She thinks about how hair is plentiful and can be used for medical purposes and wigs. Hers happen to be green, which is rare. Someone is now here, as Annette wonders if it is Mary or Gold, but tells the person to come on in. As the door opens, it turns out to be Father. The Duke asks what she was doing, to which she says nothing and asks if something is up. The Duke tells her he's going north and plans to leave in 2 days. She says she understands, before thinking about how long that would take. It's the capital and would take at least 10 days to get there by horseback. The Duke says it won't be that long since they'll use teleportation magic. This confuses our female lead, to which the Duke says he and his brother have connected teleportation circles. Annette says she sees and that she will make sure to prepare well. The Duke then tells her that upon getting there, she will see a boy that's 2 years her senior. This is his brother's son. Our female lead wonders if this is the male lead to the story. This might be the illegitimate kid from the Argo family who was taken away during his childhood. He was abandoned in the forest and grew up with monsters, making him a great beast. She recalls how a mission would take place where they picked up the boy after taking out his monster mother. This assassination organization who carried out the mission saw talent in the boy and raised him to be like them. The name of this boy is Capel Argo. The Duke says he needs to reassure his brother when they get there, since his brothers have been worrying the Duke can't find his daughter. The Duke tells his daughter to please try and get along with this child, and to be careful since the child can be aggressive. Annette says yes, as the Duke then mentions how the atmosphere is different when it's just them. Annette wonders if he likes that, before telling him to not worry, as she'll handle this mission with no mistakes. She also smiles, and she thinks he prefers that. The Duke seems nervous as he then tells her something important. He reaches his hand out to the child. Her eyes then flash as she stares. She notes how beautiful it is as he presents her with a necklace. She wonders if he's giving it to her and asks what it is. The Duke asks if she doesn't even know what that is and says it's something that he picked up. She wonders if he's supposedly picking up jewels now and when this dishonest dude will grow up. The Duke tells her he usually gives it to direct descendants, but that he's choosing to hand it to her. The jewel carries a seed that is blessed with the green power. She recalls how he said he picked it up and how that doesn't matter now. She says thank you and tells him it's so beautiful after having placed it on. The Duke looks taken aback by this for a moment. He then changes the subject, asking if she knows about the power of rust, and that he'll explain to her now. He mentions how in the Empire, there are 4 founding families that each have power and maintain the balance within the country. Their family has rust. They have the ability to hear the sounds plants make throughout the world. One can control them and are able to heal most types of injuries. The Argo family has what is called Azure. They are able to control anything that has been mixed with water. They are able to purify contaminated water and make it safe to drink. The next is Inga, who come from the east. These people control foe, or more specifically fire. These people are barbarians, and it's best to avoid them. They have the power to annihilate. The last family would be Artius of Darkness. These people are not very sociable, and Annette likely won't have to deal with them. These people control darkness, so their temperament is quite gloomy. The Duke tells her to not bother trying to please these people if she encounters them. Annette says yes to the Duke, before wondering if there's something else the Duke doesn't like apart from Lord Alf Argo. The Duke then mentions how when she was drowning, he had given her that seed to chew on, which was a part of his ability known as Water Scale Tree Seed. Our female lead asks if the Duke has memorized all the effects of plants. The Duke tells her of course, and that they'd be useless if one doesn't know what they do. Annette says her father is quite remarkable, and mentions how he's a genius, but that she's not good with these things. She thinks about how thanks to the scientist, she's only memorized the herbs and poisons that were useful to her daily life. She continues to shower him with praise as she thinks this should be enough lip service. She continues to note how she is very grateful, since without the Duke, she'd likely have been handed off to another scientist or maybe adopted by some merchant. Despite this all being somewhat of a hassle, she still feels very grateful. The Duke then says he is glad that she knows all this, and then brings up the food that she made him last time. Annette interrupts saying she is sorry for the low quality of that, and that her greed took over when she made a stew with 100 dirk meat. The Duke then says that's not what he's trying to say. He then asks if she said it was 100 dirks. She tells him yes and how she won't do it again. He surprises her by yelling the word who. He then clears his throat and more gently asks who told her that she couldn't do that. She starts to protest, as the Duke says now that he thinks about it. The food wasn't so bad, and so, in his mind he thinks about how it was actually kind of fire and he'd want to eat it again. He then recalls how Shatran said he surely would not be picky in front of the ladies cooking. This all starts to frustrate him as he says darn it internally. The Duke then says that is true, and that he needs to go now since he's busy. Our female lead is a bit confused, but then tells him to be careful on his way back. The Duke internally says damn it as he knows he's messed this conversation up. We later see a magic circle activating as lighting swirls all around. We see the father and daughter duo as the Duke tells her this is the North. Our female lead notes how as soon as she had woken up, she washed up and changed her clothes before her eyes were dazzled, and she's now here. She asks him if this really is the North, and thinks about how they got there in only 2 minutes. She thinks about how there's nothing around them and wonders if this space is specifically only used for transportation. We then see a white-haired man appear and yell the Duke's name. He welcomes him here. The Duke starts to call his brother before he gets bear hugged completely. Annette thinks about how surprising it is to see the Duke get a hug like this and not even look annoyed about it. The man continues to hug her father as she notes how this is Alf Argo. Alf says he heard a child go adopted and asks if it's this one here. Our female lead greets his grace. She thinks about how sudden this was and then takes a few deep breaths. She then tells Alf that her name is Annette Aubrey. Alf says it is nice to meet her as well and mentions how great her etiquette is. Annette says that's from her father's gene, to which Alf says that is correct, and how her father is a genius above geniuses. He says since she traveled here in the morning, she must be very tired. He'll get a room arranged so she can have breakfast and take a nap. The Duke tells her it's fine to go ahead if she is tired, to which she says yes, father. Annette thinks about how excited her dad looks and didn't even know he was able to make a face like this. Someone then tells her to move this way to the dining hall. Our female lead thinks about how she's already full. Alf tells them to have a seat as the Duke agrees. Alf then asks a maid where Capel is. The maid says they're getting fetched. Our female lead wonders if the protagonist is finally making an appearance. Alf tells her that his son is yet to have proper etiquette, and tells her to please be understanding. Our female lead smiles and says she will. She thinks about how Capel must just be cautious due to living with monsters. Alf then says she doesn't need to be too formal with him, as Annette then calls him Uncle Alf. Someone then calls to his grace Alf as Annette thinks it is finally happening. It's the protagonist from this world. We see him growling and gritting his teeth together. Our female lead stares silently. Capel continues to make sounds as Annette appears stunned and wonders if he's trying to be a beast right now. Alf looks at Annette nervously, knowing how odd this must be. He then tells them to wait a moment as Annette's father says okay. The Duke then walks toward the door where sounds continue to rain in. The Duke then tells Annette that the heir of Argo grew up with beasts since he was a child, so he's unable to speak. Since they can't communicate with them, they've been unable to teach him anything. He currently only has skills in martial arts and assassination. This causes even the elite of the Duchy and Blue Sky Knights to struggle to deal with him all the time. Annette thinks about how it was actually monsters and not beasts that raised him, and she has no clue what to say at a time like this. She tells her father that she'll try her best to get along. The Duke sighs and says okay. Something in her mind then recalls how the female protagonist of the story should have come here by now and taught Capel diligently. She taught him everything from counting from 1 to 10, and of course Capel would fall for this protagonist. Our current female lead sits thinking about how whatever this voice is should not insert interpretations as it were her own thoughts. Up until now, Annette had felt these were her own thoughts naturally, but they now feel very alienating. The voice said it judged it would be better this way, since it is now the protagonist of its own story. Our female lead starts to wonder what is going on all of the sudden and holds her head, mentioning how this voice acts like her own thoughts. She continues to struggle before someone then grabs her hand. It's her father who asks what she is doing and if she is hurt. She tells him she just felt dizzy for a bit and thinks about how mentioning what's actually happening would just make her look crazy. In her mind, she starts to feel as though she's becoming a defective product. The voice then thinks about how if its records were poured into it all at once, it'd be unable to bear it. So it decides it would use the technique just like in the novel that it liked. She then wonders if it's talking about the weird book the record showed, and wonders how that record even talks. The voice says it's made up of its own memories, its knowledge, pattern, and everything can be known. Our female lead notes how this tone is chilling and how it'd be better if this spoke like a machine rather than speaking as if it's her own thoughts. This thing then says it is me, and for the sake of its discomfort, it'll address her as master now. Our female lead thinks it must have been listening to her and wonders what on earth this is. She recalls how she only has a few years left to live and wonders if she has to live with this noisy and annoying thing. She recalls how it's getting worse, as Alf now appears and tells Capel to have a meal since he likes food. The father and daughter duo look over, as Alf holds Capel, who struggles in his arms. His purple eyes stare at them while enraged. The Duke mentions how it's relieved to see the young master Capel is healthy. Alf mentions how bringing him back safely is fortunate enough. Annette notes how it's quite ambitious to bring Capel to a meal like this and wonders what these adults are thinking treating a child in that condition like this. Of course he would rebel if he had to do something he doesn't want to do. They are using only strength to suppress a child that's lived in a world with monsters. Alf then tells the child to sit down and eat then. He continues to act out before Alf, then yells to stop, which stuns him. He seems to sit quietly now. The Duke mentions how Capel couldn't even sit at the table previously and mentions how this is an improvement. Alf says they've been training so Capel is now able to sit down for meals. Someday, Capel looks a bit sad as Annette stares at him for a moment. She thinks about how this sort of discipline is wrong, but that even if they speak firmly he'd not be able to understand, he'd just think they're yelling at him. Annette thinks he should not be treated like this and then starts to move out of her seat. She goes right before the child and then asks if they should eat over there. Her father yells at her as Annette thinks Capel must not be afraid, and that it's better if he trusts her. We later see her seated on the floor with a piece of bread. Both the adults are stunned as she joyfully eats it. Even Capel is alarmed as he watches her eat the bread. Alf yells at Capel as we then see him joyfully join up with Annette. The Duke starts to speak, but Alf tells him to wait. The Duke wonders what his brother is doing. We see the pair of children happy together as Alf then says he's never seen that kid smile like this. He's moved to tears as we see Capel enjoying himself.